You know, when you hear the name Jacob Grimm, you probably think of fairy tales, right? But his real obsession, his life's work, was something so much deeper. He was on the hunt for a hidden history of belief. And he came to this incredible conclusion. The old gods of Germanic mythology, they never actually died. They just, well, they went into hiding, waiting for us to find them again. And that's really the core of what Grimm was getting at. He saw that these ancient beliefs, they don't just vanish into thin air. Nope, they adapt. They weave themselves into our language, into our folk stories, and even into those little superstitions we don't think twice about. They survive by changing their clothes, you could say, just waiting for someone like Grimm to look close enough to see what's underneath. So we're going to follow Grimm's trail through 4 really fascinating areas. First, we'll look at the gods who are supposedly sleeping inside mountains. Then we'll get into the ancient power of wish, and it's not what you think. After that, we'll see how powerful goddesses got twisted into the witches we know today. And finally, we'll uncover some pagan rituals that are still alive in our modern world. Okay, first up is this amazing concept called Entrückung. Now, this isn't your typical story of gods dying and going to some underworld. No, this is way cooler. It's about them being translated or sort of spirited away, preserved in a timeless sleep until the world needs them to wake up again. Think of it like a divine cryosleep. For the ancient Germanic people, mountains weren't just lumps of rock. They were portals. They were gateways to a hidden world where time just stops. And deep inside these mountains, the greatest heroes and even the gods themselves aren't dead. Not at all. They're just sleeping. And what's wild is how specific these legends get. You've got Emperor Barbarossa, who's said to be sleeping inside the Kyffhauser mountain, and his beard is supposedly growing right through a stone table. People used to swear they could hear Kaiser Karl's soldiers singing from inside another mountain. And, get this, the great god Woden himself was said to live inside the Odenberg, which was the starting point for the terrifying wild hunt. But it wasn't just the male heroes who went into hiding. Grimm also zeroed in on the white women from folklore. He saw them as these sorrowful, tragic figures, the last remnants of incredibly powerful pagan goddesses like Holda and Bertha, who were basically demoted and cursed as Christianity took over. You can really see their tragic story right here. They still have these little echoes of their divine past, right? They might offer you a gift of grain that magically turns to gold, a little memory of when they were goddesses of fertility. But now, they're unblessed spirits. They often show up with a deformed goose foot, which was a mark of their curse, and they're trapped, needing a mortal's help to finally find some peace. Okay, let's shift gears and look at the actual mechanics of magic, because Grimm figured out that at the very heart of ancient Germanic belief was this incredibly powerful idea known as Wunsc, or what we'd call a wish. So in this ancient worldview, a wish wasn't just, wanting something. It was a creative force. It was the godlike ability to shape reality, to literally think something into its most perfect ideal form. It's almost like an ancient version of manifestation or the power of intention. And this power, it originally belonged to the gods, especially to Woden, the great seeker of all knowledge. But, and this is the cool part, mortals could find ways to tap into this divine power using special tools. The dowsing rod, for example, was seen as a conduit for your will, helping you find hidden things. The mandrake root, the alruna, was like a living talisman that could tell the future. And the miracle flower was a literal, physical key to unlocking that hidden world of the gods. This old folktale is the perfect example, and it's basically an esoteric lesson in a story. So a guy finds this magic flower, and boom, it opens up a mountain full of treasure. As he's stuffing his pockets with gold, a voice warns him, "Forget not the best." But he's so caught up in his greed that he leaves the flower, the spiritual key, behind. And as soon as he steps out, the door slams shut forever. The moral is crystal clear. If you value material junk over spiritual knowledge, you're going to lose both. All right, now we get to one of Grimm's most powerful and probably most famous arguments. How the wise women and revered goddesses of the old pagan world were deliberately, systematically turned into the evil witches of folklore. Grimm, being a master linguist, argued that the proof is baked right into the words themselves. The German word for witch, Hexe, it comes from Hagazusa, which meant a hedge rider, someone who could cross the boundary between worlds. A monster called an Unholda is just a twisted version of the goddess Holda's name. Even our English word witch comes from an old word that simply meant to prophesy. The language itself tells the story of how something sacred was made to seem evil. So the medieval witch basically becomes this demonic photocopy of the divine figures that came before her. Look at this.
The Valkyrie flies on a wolf to a sacred feast with the gods. The witch flies on a broom to a demonic sabbat with the devil. The Valkyrie weaves the threads of fate. The witch weaves evil curses. The actions are almost exactly the same. It's just the sacred divine context that's been ripped out and replaced with something demonic.
So finally, let's look at all those little things we tend to just call superstitions. Grimm made a compelling case that these aren't just silly, ignorant beliefs. They are, in fact, the last surviving fragments, like living fossils, of ancient pagan healing and protection rituals that simply refuse to disappear. This right here is an absolutely incredible find that Grimm brought to light. It's a 10th century magical charm, written in Old High German. It's a spell that calls on the god Woden to heal a horse's broken leg by chanting bone to bone, limb to limb. This is a pure, uncut piece of pre-Christian magic. And the only reason it survived is because later on, people just swapped out the pagan gods' names for Christian saints. This ritual really shows you just how deep the connection to the natural world was. To cure someone, you would drill a hole in a living tree, put a lock of the sick person's hair inside, and then plug it up. The belief was that the illness would literally transfer from the person into the tree, and as the tree grew over the plug, the sickness would be trapped forever in the wood. It's this powerful idea of a shared life force connecting everything. So when you put it all together, what Grimm really shows us is a world where mythology isn't just a dusty collection of dead stories. No, it's a living, breathing system of belief. It's an organism that adapts and transforms so it can survive. It hides itself in mountains. It disguises itself in fairy tales. It buries itself in our language, and it lives on in the little rituals that we casually call superstitions. And that's why Jacob Grimm's work is still so incredibly important. It makes us look at our own world in a completely different way. You know, from knocking on wood for good luck, which is totally an echo of old beliefs about tree spirits, to saying bless you when someone sneezes. His research invites us to see the faint but persistent echoes of a hidden, ancient world that is all around us every single day,